Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. We're picking up with part 2 here of information on Ruth Drown and the very rare book that apparently never made it into English by, of all people, R. MurrayDenning, who is a renowned author and radionic practitioner who I believe worked with Ruth Drown when she came over from the United States. Now, what's interesting here is it shows you very rare pictures here. Look at this. This is the reception area to the college and a laboratory. Very interesting. And here's some treatment areas within her facilities. Here's actually classroom photographs. So you can see that it's, I wouldn't say it's a huge room right here, but certainly we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There could be at least 10 chairs there showing that. And here's underneath here, you see even more. What do you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So what we're talking about is this is not, 2 chairs and a monkey grinder. This is a serious college where people were being taught. What's interesting is what happened to all these people. Where did they go? What happened? I don't know if this became part of some chiropractic teaching, but really not. What happened here was the fact that this school, after she was basically persecuted and found guilty of criminal acts, and her daughter being in prison for, I don't know, it was 2 to 3 years. And the secretary, I believe, got probation or a shorter amount of time. So here we go again. Let's look at this stuff. Here's the classic where you would sit in a chair and they would check your conductivity. Again, did any of this work? We don't know. She was in business for a long time. It's hard to believe if this was just all a big con that she could make money. And here again is some laboratory setups. You can see the banks of machines here and the way they work. And where did all this go? Well, most likely all of this stuff got chopped up into firewood and was destroyed. You really can't find any of it. Here's a very typical desktop radionic machine, which was classical of that time. Everything had this kind of giant cabinet with it, like record players and TVs, and what goes. So very fascinating to look at this old. Here's more units, which I've never seen before. Here's a bank of 8 units and a control and some foot panels, which were common in old radionic units as well. People would have foot, or you put your foot on it, which makes sense if you're sending more energy that way, whether the energy is going in or out. Here's another unit, which looks like it's a, what is it, an 8 dial or so. It's hard to see from this very bad photograph. And here, this looks like a 6, 7 dial of unit of some sort that goes with it. So lots of rare stuff here. Here's some more big units. Here's another typical tabletop unit, huge, with all the dials and everything else in it. And here's another one. Now, these are all very impractical. You have to have huge facilities to use such like this. And while I think some of this stuff is still around and some people are hiding it and keeping it and whatever, in general, you're not going to really find any of this stuff any longer. You rarely see original Ruth Drown stuff come up. I have a lot of old Delaware instruments, etc. And these are as rare as hen's teeth, but there's no interest in it. Here's another unit. And here's a whole bunch of stuff you can see. So this is a, this is a very complicated setup here that we have. There's a lot going on here. And here's another type of unit. And that's one of the things as well. There doesn't seem to have been a standard unit with a lot of this stuff. There was the Ruth Drown ray machine and so many other things that you get into. It gets very diffused over the years as people come up with new instruments. Here's a classic one that you see in a lot of pictured when people talk about instruments model 551, the Ruth Drown Radio Vision. And this was a 9-dial instrument again, 9 being pretty much the standard dialing that you'd find in these machines. Here's another 9-dial. So you're running into the, well, it's 2 9-dials. So 9 is really the actual number of dials that you can commonly see. And here's some diagrams, 9 dials again. So you need 9 dials to do any serious work. And of course, there were cameras and photography done with some of her instruments, which supposedly was done in England with De La Warr, where she had an actual camera to take pictures of so many things. But, you know, what does this really mean? A lot of this stuff gets to be a little ridiculous. And here's an automatic diagnosis unit that they put together. And again, this typical of the time, the 50s and so forth, which are giant console type units. What's interesting here's a back picture of it. And when you look at all this stuff, you got to remember this is 1940s and 50s electronics. From what I understand, Ruth Drown worked in a radio factory during the war and made electronic equipment for the military. So it goes, particularly radios. So she had a background in that and knew how to make stuff. But you have to also remember this is pre-solid state, pre-anything. There wasn't major movements in electronics until transistors and other things came in, which has been claimed to have come from maybe crashed alien aircraft who use integrated circuits. But we just don't know with any of that stuff, and there isn't much to it. I don't think there's any more. Okay, we got a few here. What was that? Here's another 9-dial instrument, a big one, with a drawer at the bottom and other gauges. Here's again showing you 9 dials and showing you how they are set up in different ways of where they're dialed into. She generally used, like a lot of people did, that the first or last dial usually was 1 to 100. These kind of things have kind of fallen out of use. It's not really critical with it. But this is a whole thing on Ruth Drown and her belief system, which Denning's put together. Quite fascinating. Here's this British guy, and I checked it out. He really is British. He's not German. He is British 100%. He lived there. He died there, etc. And here are some different books. Of course, here is my search for Radionics, which, of course, is his other book. So there's only been 2 books, but this is his book we don't see. Now, a lot of Tansley books have been translated into German. And, of course, Ramzadi, of course, is a guy who's written a lot of books apparently in German, although he is obviously that's an Italian name. I'm not entirely sure. He obviously speaks German, etc., but I'm not sure what he considers himself. So a very fascinating and rare book, and we're trying to work through some of these things. There's a fair amount of original, I'm not sure how original, but there's a fair amount of books written on radionics in German over the last 40, 50 years. So I have collected most of these, but translation is a huge job, which I don't have time. Anybody who wants to translate anything or knows how to do it, from what I understand, if you scan a book and you can then translate the book, the scan book, you can convert into the language you want it in once you have it scanned. Supposedly, this is a process that you can do. I'm not entirely sure how this is done, but translation technologies and everything else have come an awful long way. So there must be some way of doing that which can make it faster than the tech that I have right now. And I'm going to be doing some stuff on translating technologies here in the future so people can see what's out there. Now, certainly is fascinating. So what is this all about? This guy, a Britisher, wrote this book on Ruth Drown with a lot of apparently exclusive photographs and everything else. yet we don't have this in English, yet this is an English person. Very, very interesting and odd. And why is this book itself done? So apparently, it looks like Claudio here got a copy, maybe from Denning's himself, and translated it into German, which he then published, because I can't find Denning's, this book by Denning's anywhere in the world. This is the only printed copy of his work, which had to be converted over to German because Denning's was not German. So where are the original editions, and did it ever make it? Maybe nobody ever wanted his book. You got to remember My Search for Radionic Truth, which was a fairly small book, was, and I believe he published himself and then later sold it to Borderland Science. Apparently didn't have much of a actual following over there or people interested in publishing it. There's been different groups in the UK, Radionic Association, the Radionic this and that, but none of them really have lasted very long or have done much of anything. They're not really publishing anything of their own to speak, other than their, I don't know if it's quarterly journals. They do have quarterly journals that the Radionic Association out of Britain publishes. I don't follow that stuff much, but I do have copies of it, which, again, who has time to read? But how fascinating is this, people, that you have a book written by a top Britisher, one of the rarest books out there. There's probably a bunch of gems in here. As I said, Ruth Drown is an amazing person who really didn't just try and sell instruments or con people to get the money out of them for medical issues. She was running colleges, running major, what would be considered a chiropractic type hospital. And of course, this is what, or treatment center, I should say, and this is what got her into trouble. So, but she was recognized as a person who could handle very serious situations. If you've got problems with bleeding, you don't solve these problems, you die. Now, what was that? Was she using a radionic instrument, dialing in a rate that actually stopped bleeding? Well, if that's the case, this is mind-blowing. Now, there is some history of this in the metaphysical arts. The Hexen Masters out of Pennsylvania, misnomered as the Pennsylvania Dutch, when they really were the Pennsylvania Germans. Dutch came from the fact that the Germans don't call themselves Germans, they call themselves Deutsch. And as such, your hillbilly down in America didn't hear the difference between Deutsch and Dutch. So they figured, oh, you're Dutch. Because nobody sees Germany as Deutschland except Germans. This is a Persian word that was carried on from their Persian Arab Aryan tradition. So the whole idea is so they were misnomered that. But the bottom line is that supposedly the Hex Masters could put symbols and do some sort of prayers over bleeding and were able to stop the bleeding. Now, again, this is stuff that's been highly lost out there because of many reasons, even though it's a tradition that is not all that old, 150 years old or so, maybe less than that, where there is a tradition of Hexen masters, who, and you'll see these things painted on barns, etc., of symbols that are supposed to keep away disease and evil spirits. And I'm not sure how much of this is still practiced in these communities, but certainly that was going on. But there was the thought of it. And I highly recommend the movie Apprentice to Murder, which gives you an actual case that went on between a Hexen master and the public. Very, very fascinating, and shows the exact way a person who is a metaphysical person, a person who studies energy would look at life. Very, very fascinating, highly recommended, and probably a film that never really did very well, starring Donald Sutherland and what's his name? Chad. He's the brother of the, I can't think of his name. But the whole idea is that really a fantastic, well done film that everyone should see. But they were able to pray over bleeding people, supposedly, and stop the bleeding. Now, Ruth Drown was a specialist of this, but could not be proven to do it. Now, again, was she told to fail? We're making you an offer you can't refuse. If you come out and you show university authorities or you show the media that this stuff works, we will kill you and your family. And this happens all the time. So is that the pressure she was under? So when she went to did something, she failed horribly? We don't know. But this is always the case where Albert Abrams' associates failed as well, and this seems to be the case, and they were tested by Scientific American. I believe Ruth Drown was tested by a major university, and which, you know, by the way, doesn't give them any credit. You're not, just because you're a major university, it means you're in the pocket of the big business who fund you. It gives them a lack of credibility. Teachers, professors, and anybody in the university system are all corrupt, rotten people. So if you think somehow that we should look at them like there's something great like NASA, well, you're pretty misinformed and you don't understand the world. The world is not run like that. And if you're going to do something that is earth-shaking, that actually upsets billions and billions of dollars, you're in big trouble, as what happened with the Boeing reps, who both of them were recently, whistleblowers, were recently murdered. So the whole idea is, what gives, Uncle Jim? So the whole idea is that this is what is going on in the bigger picture. And certainly this is a fascinating book that never made it into English, and it's been sitting out there. This must have came out in the 80s. Dennings has been dead for a long time. So the whole idea is that, and he was old when he published his books, but this book is probably written by Dennings. You know, if the first book came out, and I believe, was it 1980 or something? I'm not sure. Or 90. You're still talking about 40, 50 years ago that never made it into English, written by him and his wife to talk about Ruth Drown, who did make a big impact in Europe and brought this tech to them and taught a lot of different people. So this is something that should be looked into. Well, what happened here then? Again, you know, all this stuff is fascinating. It would be wonderful to spend time to investigate this, find out who Ruth Drown really was, and if we can get anything about it. But these are momentous projects. And now we've gotten to the point, as is what's happening with World War II veterans, and even now with Vietnam veterans, is they're all dying off. So whatever they know dies with them. And since they've been discredited, you can't get any information. Now, so we just don't know. We have no idea what happened to her daughter, how long she lived. There was talk that she had a son. I don't know about that. There was talk that someone was living in Oregon about 25, 30 years ago. But again, you know, her children would be very old now as well. So this is all part of the reality of it and part of what's out there. It certainly is fascinating, and you at least got a good little glimpse of this. As I said, I will probably slowly translate this. And anybody who wants to help, contact me and we'll get you a copy of this. Is certainly fascinating. So this should be done. Nobody is saving anything radionics. There's nobody in the industry that's doing anything. The radionic industry has been taken over by criminal law enforcement, or if you can call them that, unlaw enforcement, and Satanists, and who are perpetrating it out there. And we have nothing but deceivers and liars in this field. And the reason they're in this field is to totally and completely discredit it, excuse me, and hide this technology. Now, this technology is passé now. The foundation of it is interesting, but it is dead and gone. And we need to start using which I'm the only one doing, using the technology that we have today to make these specific type of energetic forms powerful and more effective for use in all of your life. You know, people need a lot of metaphysical help, protection, getting rid of negativity, stopping psychic and other attacks on them. It's more than just working with this energy medicine, which is what this is, because this is really not medicine in any way. You know, I always say that alternative energy practitioners work from the outside in, while medical doctors work from the inside out. It's apples and oranges, and they have nothing to do with each other. So, but there's much more than that. This whole technology has unlimited uses for people to expand their consciousness, their intelligence, to understand things beyond the normal. So there's a lot going on here, and going back to old machines like this, which you really have no idea how they work and what they do, is certainly folly. And even if we find things, you got to remember that the actual electronics of these things go back to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. It's all very old stuff that has lost a lot of its value, and we need to upgrade these things as well. And of course, a lot of the older stuff has been refined. The new thing coming out on the electronics industry is going to be the massive influx of vacuum tubes into the computer industry, which can move information at unbelievable speeds, which that you cannot do with transistorized and the methods of moving information. The only way to move massive amounts of information is by using vacuum tubes and lasers. And this is where everybody's going. So it's not the fact, but we have to apply these technologies in a new fashion that we have now. So all the old junk out there, which is nothing more than little wooden boxes with dials and wires going underneath, are a complete waste of time. And they're nothing more than psychic focusers. And of course, you can get results with psychic focusing, but that's not real tech. We have to go past that. So hope everyone's enjoyed. Until next time.